Hey everybody, we hope you had a wonderful Christmas. We are here today talking about our last Sunday service that we just did, where we started a brand new sermon series called God is Two.
Yeah.
And Jacob and I got to preach this past Sunday, so we're going to kind of just dive in a little bit to our services.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So this past Sunday we talked about your God is too small, and we were both talking about that. And we both don't get the opportunity to preach all that often. So what is your kind of process whenever you hear what you're going to be preaching about? Kind of walk us through what that looks like for you.
Sure. Thankfully, even though, we're not necessarily the people preaching every week, we get to be a part of the conversation about like the sermon series and stuff that we're going to do. And so I always enjoy getting to be a part of that process to begin with. And then in my last job before I came to Woods Chapel, I was preaching all the time. And so it's something I'm accustomed to. Teach a lot for students, obviously, now. As far as like the process is concerned, for me, it's kind of dependent upon the sermon. So depending on, the topic, or if there's, if we base it around a scripture, like something, I try to find something in it that like I want to build around,
right.
I guess. So, obviously it's important to us to be, authentic to what the Bible's saying and that sort of thing. And so I always want to take that into account, but, it's not always the first place that I start, in terms of how to kind of craft, what I want to say.
Great.
What's yours?
Yeah,
We've never talked about this.
Yeah. I kind of start with the, like, what is it that I want people to walk away from? And I feel like I kind of write my sermon backwards from there. Of like, what do I want people, if they only could hear this one thing, this is what I want them to walk away knowing. And then I walk backwards from that. But we've kind of talked on here before how Brian puts a bunch of like pictures in his sermons.
Yeah, it's wild. You guys gotta see it sometime.
Yeah, so I don't do that, but I always write out everything, and then I have so many notes to myself in the margins. So I have like my typed out, and then I have all these notes written in pencil to myself when I preach as well.
I would never do that. Like, if I'm gonna write something, I have to like go back and retype it, because if it's like written in the margins, I know I won't get to it or whatever.
Yeah, it's just funny how everyone like has a different way of doing it.
But. So you talked a little bit in yours about love languages and about how yours is gift giving, not necessarily gift receiving. So I'm curious, what is your favorite gift that you've ever given to somebody?
Ooh, that's a really good one. The one that pops into my mind first off was a homemade. So one of my friends in high school, Alex Wiedemeyer, shout out, we used to always make homemade
Hope you're
gifts.
watching, Alex.
What's up? We used to make homemade gifts for each other all the time. Like, that was kind of our thing. And she loves jigsaw puzzles. And so I made this t-shirt where I had spray painted all of these jigsaw puzzles, and then I put them on this shirt. So, like, it was a very tedious shirt that I made, and I don't know if she ever even wore it, but that wasn't the point. It was just, like, a really, like, intricate...
Wait, so it was a shirt that had, like, a puzzle
No,
glued
it was,
to
like... It was, like, a puzzle, like, yeah, but I made all these stencils and then spray painted on the shirt, so the shirt looked like it had all these different colors of paint on it. So, yeah, there wasn't, like, pieces attached to it.
That makes a lot more sense. In my head, you glued puzzle pieces to a shirt and expected your friend to
No,
wear
it was, like, stencils of puzzle pieces.
So that would have been wild.
Yes, no, not quite that. But, okay, so then on yours, you were talking about how, like, God wants us to do these really big things and wants to bless us. And you were talking about this napkin of, like, taking it times 100. So have you done that for yourself, or what does that look like in your prayer life?
Yeah, so that idea actually came from a book called Hero Maker that Robin had the campus leadership team read recently. And they call it a dream napkin. And so the idea is that you're supposed to take like your vision for your ministry and then multiply it by 100. And so so we recently, when we were doing this as a team here at the church, one of the big things as I transitioned into family ministry was a lot of research has been done to find out that roughly 70% of young people leave church when they leave home, which is really, really high.
Yeah.
And so the like pragmatic side of me is like, okay, what does it take to get from 70% to 60% at Woods Chapel? And then, so that was kind of the first thing that I wrote down on my napkin. And then when we went through that process with our leadership team, it kind of forced me to dream bigger, and that's the whole point. And I was like, okay, so what does it look like to get to zero? What is it? What do we have to do? How do we have to see God work through us to see 0% of young people leave church just because they left home?
I love that. That's great.
So you were talking about the book that you referenced, and that idea of elephant prayers. And so the quote that you gave that I really appreciated was, the end of it was, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, but what if our job was just to pray?
Right.
And I kind of really like that idea, because I think for a lot of people, we maybe put our own expectations on prayer, and it can become really overwhelming. Like, what if I pray for my friend who's sick and they don't get better?
Right.
Then what does that say about God? Is God in fact too small? What does it say about my faith? Did I not have enough faith that God didn't hear my prayers? And it can kind of be really overwhelming to pray big prayers.
Yeah.
And so I like that idea of just like, no, your job's just to pray. It's God's job to come through. It's God's job to show up. It's God's job to do this sort of thing. And so I guess I'm curious, you mentioned praying for one of your friends. What are some, like, what is like a big prayer that you feel like you've prayed that it helped you to approach with that mentality? Like, you know what, it's not my job to see God come through. It's just my job to be committed to the conversation.
Yeah. I definitely have seen those like throughout. I think probably like the one that comes to my mind in the forefront is my relationship with my husband Kyle, just in the fact that we started dating so young. Like, we were high school sweethearts.
Kyle,
shout out to Kyle. We were high school sweethearts, and so like making those transitions from like high school to college to adult life, like those are already times that you're trying to figure yourself out, let alone like trying to keep a relationship. And it's really cool now to like go back and see some of those prayers that I had about our relationship, and now seeing that we're like 3.5 years into a marriage and like stuff like that. So it's just been really cool to just see God's faithfulness. And that's also why I love to do prayer journaling, is you can really look back and be like, wow, I was really like, this was a really difficult time that I was really struggling with this, but I don't struggle with that anymore because God was there for that, which is really cool.
So that actually, normally we would trade off, but that actually transitions to our next one. So I want to follow up.
Yeah.
You talked about prayer journal for you. What are other practices you think are helpful if someone out there is like, you know what, I would love to pray more. I would love to pray better, whatever that means. I would love to pray these big elephant prayers and see God show up, but I just don't even know where to start. For you, it's journaling. What are some other practices you think that people could implement to help them when it comes to prayer?
Yeah. This is something that we've done. I've used this at church camp, and actually, again, that's funny that you bring this up because this is something else that my friend Alex uses too. So full circle there. But she does a lot of like using an image. So every time you see rain or every time like you get in your car, like that's for her. I believe for her it is rain. Like whenever it rains or whenever she sees running water, for her that's like when she really like is a kickoff for her that like I'm gonna pray. So I think just like it doesn't necessarily have to be as disciplined as like I'm gonna sit down and journal, but I think being disciplined in some way of saying I want to make time for this, regardless if that's journaling, coloring, just setting aside time to do that. I think that's great.
I'm similar to that. So I'm a marker person also. Whether it's, tangible things. I've gone on mission trips in the past, and I've always made sure to like bring home a token as a reminder to pray for the people that I met while I was there. The big one for me around kind of that dream of how do we get from 70% to 0%. The passage that our family ministry model is based off of is Deuteronomy chapter 4, and in the after the Shema, it talks about writing things on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. And so for a long time, I've been in the habit of tapping door frames as I walk through them, and it's a small, tangible reminder for me to pray for our families, to pray for the families in our community, to pray for our ministry. Even when I wasn't working in family ministry, it was something that I just like habitually did, and now I can't stop.
I love that. Well, and I've noticed it, but I never knew that that's why you did that. So that's super fascinating. I love that. So this whole series that we're like, this was just week 1, but it's all about your God is two. And each week we're going to focus on a different thing. So what is it about this sermon series that like gets you excited or, you know, speaks to you about this sermon series?
So I think when we were planning it, I was one of the people who pushed to start it the week after Christmas because I wanted to preach it. And the thing that excites me about it, and I said a little bit about this yesterday or on Sunday, was I think that these are ideas, or I use the word criticism when I talked about it. I think these are criticisms that people who aren't people of faith have about God. These are ways that people who don't go to church, people who don't have a relationship with Jesus, these are some of the reasons why. That God feels small, that God feels distant, that God feels impersonal, that God feels exclusive, all these things that we're going to talk about. And so I was really excited about this series because I thought that it specifically, and this is kind of my previous role at Woods Chapel, I think, coming out, but it specifically gave us a forum to talk to people who aren't people of faith yet. And I know Brian's got some really exciting stuff planned with how we're going to use these in our digital ministry and that sort of thing to continue to try to reach more people who don't yet call Woods Chapel home. Yeah,
I love that. Yeah, it's definitely an invitational call of, you know, we hear you. We hear that these are some of the, like, preconceived notions and ideas that we have, so let's address them and talk about them.
Yeah, it is. And I hope that's, I mean, for people that do call Woods Chapel home, for someone who's like, well, I don't feel like God's smaller, I don't feel like God's distant, what does this series have for me? I think that it does have something for you because I work here and there are times where I think I limit God. I mean, you talked about that in your sermon too. So I think that there's something in it for us, but I think this is also a great opportunity for us to remind people to, like, this is a great series to share. If you're ever going to share one of our services on Facebook, like, share this series. And maybe not even just a public share, maybe a private share in Facebook Messenger or something like that to a specific person who you know has this idea, has this criticism, or has this struggle, and it's kind of created some tension between them and their relationship with God. So I think this is a great, invitational opportunity, not just for us as a staff or us as people who are preaching, but for everyone who's listening.
Yeah, great. Very good. Do you have any other questions?
I don't think so.
Sounds good. Well, thank you we're excited about the sermon series, obviously, so we hope that you will join us again next week. And if you have any questions or anything like that, again, feel free to send them our way. We'd love to discuss those more in depth. But until then, we hope you guys have a good week.
Happy New Year.
Bye, guys.